This is a conversation with Alex Puette. He's an actor on Broadway, currently a cast member of the award-winning Hadestown, where he's an understudy for the role of Hades. In this conversation, we discuss his process before and after every Broadway show, his journey getting into theater, his process behind auditioning for these roles, and the magic of live theater. This is No Time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, or rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Every episode I make costs me upwards of $1 million each. Also, my assistant tells me. I haven't gotten the time yet to look into the numbers. But if you'd like to see this project continue, then do consider making a donation on Patreon or on Anchor. If not through monetary channels, then do consider sharing these episodes, liking them, commenting. Your engagement goes a long way. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, it's No Time. Andre de Shields once said that performing answers 3 major questions in my life. How can I satisfy that chattering magpie in my head that we call the mind, but is actually an ego? How can I satisfy the yearnings of my heart? How can I answer that quiet voice that tells me the truth? And the only way to do that is to perform.
Ooh.
We start deep.
Wow.
So today you are a cast member of the award-winning Hadestown on Broadway at the Walter Kerr Theatre in New York City. At the end of every show, as you take the curtain call, as you raise your cups, do you ever get the feeling, like Andre de Shields, that you have now finally satisfied your mind, ego, yearnings of your heart, and also that quiet voice that tells you the truth?
Well, I'm already tearing up and we're only 20 seconds into this interview, so
It's
that's
a
great.
new record.
Absolutely. You know, I feel the same way before the show and at curtain call, right before I enter the stage and right at curtain call. And it's gratitude. This is everything I've always wanted. I've been working for this since I was 6 years old. I wanted to be on Broadway ever since I can remember. And I get to do it every day. And it is never lost on me how special that is and how few people get to actually do that and say that they achieved that. And I, listening to you, I'd never heard those words of Andre's. Those are beautiful words. And yeah, my heart, I leave my heart on that stage every single day. It's the nature of the show is one that you have to put your entire self into it every single night. And I do. And by the end, it is exhausting, it is rewarding. And I look out into that audience and I see people crying and cheering. And it's everything I've always wanted. And I pinch myself. I can't believe I get to do it every day.
It's two very interesting things you mentioned in that it's possible when you start pursuing a passion or your hobby, it ends up becoming work and you might lose that joy in it, but you're still able to maintain that gratitude and that joy in it. That's pretty special. The second thing you mentioned was that you feel the same way before the show and after the show. I wanted you to talk me through what do you feel exactly when the show is just about to start. Let's imagine it's T-minus 10 minutes before the show is about to start. You've got the outfit, you've got the makeup, you've got the look of the character. You're getting into the emotional state of the character as well. You can hear the audience coming in, the murmurs, the whispers, they're getting to their seats. The stage is ready, the set is ready, the lights on the stage. And I always have loved this quality about stages when the show is just about to start, where everything's ready and the lights are on it, but nothing's yet there yet. And it has the quality that something's about to happen, right? So what exactly are you feeling in this moment? You mentioned gratitude, of course. Are you nervous as well? Are there any routines that you use to get yourself in that state? What do you feel when a show is just about to start?
Sure. So we get our 10-minute, we get a 15-minute call to places. And that one I'm still usually getting dressed, I'm getting ready. 5 minutes is when it's like, okay, dressed, I'm ready. I usually look at myself in my dressing room mirror. I take a big deep breath, because if I have learned anything in my years in show business, it's that I need to just take one moment. It's before an audition, before I walk on stage, before any big moment. I have to take a breath just to like recenter myself, to ground myself in that moment. And so then I walk down to the stage. So I don't necessarily get nervous anymore. The first week or two that I did it, I would get these butterflies in my stomach because, You've seen the show. So the show starts with the house lights are up and the actors just all of a sudden walk onto the stage. There's no like, they don't bring the house lights down. There's no curtain. So the actors just walk out. So we have backstage a cue light, and it's this red light that goes on. And that's like a warning. That's like, okay, you're about to get on stage. And then as soon as that light goes off, everybody has to walk on stage. So those first couple weeks, especially the first couple days, I would just look at that light and like, oh my gosh, I can feel it now. I'm getting goosebumps. My heart would start racing. I would get butterflies in my stomach. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And then the light would go off and you just run on stage and you're shot out of the cannon. Yeah. Now I do feel way more centered. There's this beautiful camaraderie we have backstage with everybody, with the orchestra, the cast, the crew. And so we all kind of like right in those moments, we're all kind of together and like we have our moments. So the people that enter on stage with me, we do 20 big jumps. It's just something that I started when I got there. I just wanted to like get my energy up. Yeah. And so everyone around me started to notice that. And they were like, oh, we're going to join you. And so now it's a superstitious thing. I have to do it. So it's good. I mean, truly, it is mostly gratitude. Yes, I'm a little nervous. Yeah, sometimes I'm like really tired and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, here, I got to get this energy up. But the last thing I think of right as that light goes off is like, I get to do this. Like, I've always wanted this and now I get to do this every single day. And it really is. I'm never not grateful. And that's the biggest takeaway I have from this.
I love it. What a powerful feeling. Hadestown was unique that you mentioned the introduction is quite unique. Not many Broadway shows do it in that sense. And just to imagine that you're backstage taking big jumps, the entire cast is a picture I didn't have in mind. So another thing I want to explore, you've mentioned you've always been grateful. This is something you wanted to do. Let's explore your journey a bit. When you were 5 or 6 years old, your parents took you for a youth theater production of Snow White. And your first reaction upon watching it was, this is it. This is what I want to do. Given everything you've studied about theater, about acting, about engaging an audience now, are you able to pinpoint what it was about theater that pulled you in even at the age of 5?
Absolutely. It was escape. It was this, and I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up in a very wonderful, I'm very lucky. I had amazing parents, amazing siblings. But when I was watching that youth theater production of Snow White with like other children were the actors, like, but I remember I was lost in it. I was transfixed by this like magic that was happening on stage in front of me. And I felt transported into this world that I was not a part of. And it just allowed me to be somewhere else for that moment. And that was a beautiful thing to me, even as a 5-year-old. And I think that's what I was like, I want to get lost in that world more. I want to find ways to like be a part of something so magical. And I still feel that way today. I think that is the gift of theater for an audience, that whatever's happening in the world, whatever's happening in their personal lives, they can always go to the theater and just lose themselves in a beautiful story for a few hours and then go back to their life and take away something from that. But I think as an actor, what's really special is that you get to not just be a part of that for the audience, but like you get to feel that yourself. Like whatever's going on in my life, for those 2.5 hours, I am in this brand new world, this imaginary world, and get to create this magic that there's an energy when you're on stage. It's something almost divine or mystical where you kind of lock in with everybody else on stage and you're just like a part of this like moving, flowing being. And to get lost in that energy is what keeps me doing this with my life.
I love it. It's a lot of actors, in particular live mediums, so even sports, for example, they talk about this flow state, the zone, this energy that takes over. You mentioned this divine energy that takes over. Do you get the feeling that at that point you're not you're not an actor making conscious choices, or it's just like some creativity or some art, I'm probably not articulating the best way possible, but some creative is taking hold of you and just using you as a vessel to express itself? Maybe it's getting too abstract.
Absolutely. I think that's why you train and you get the technique so that you can then get to that place where you don't have to think about it, and that you can lose yourself in that energy. And I've been training to do this my entire life. And so, and I know the show enough now, right? Like, you rehearse something so much so that it's just in your body. And that way, when you get on stage, you can just be present, because it's live theater. Stuff always happens. It is never, ever, ever the same show twice. So you have to be present. You have to be in the flow of all of that. And the only way to really, I feel like, be a part of that is to have your technique down, to have your training, to have the rehearsal, to know what the working mechanisms of it all, so that you can then just give into it and just breathe with it.
It's never the same show twice. I do have a question on that. We will come to it once we're done covering your journey. So it started with Snow White. At the age of 13, you got the hotly coveted role of Frog Number 1 in a production of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
I sure did.
I mean, if it's any comfort to you, my first role on stage was Ray of Sunlight number 5.
Hey!
Yeah, so there was one kid who was the sun, and there were 5 kids running around him who were like rays of light, and I was number 5.
Number 5.
Yeah, I wasn't even in the top 3 that night, so we all start somewhere. And then I believe from there, or I believe at the age of 13, you got into a production of Bye Bye Birdie.
Mm-hmm.
Might got the ages mixed up, which is starring Rue McClanahan from the Golden Girls.
Yes.
And the first national tour you booked was Legally Blonde, right? I wanted to explore an interesting pattern that developed out of this. When you got Legally Blonde, one of the cast members had to leave. They wanted an immediate replacement. You happened to be the perfect person with the right skills at the right time. The same pattern repeated itself when you got West Side Story in Paris. Immediate replacement. You had all the skills, all the talent, happened to be in the right place at the right time. Same pattern with the Hadestown as well. I have 2 questions on this. The first is, given the unique nature of these circumstances around these auditions, you've mentioned in the previous interview that you feel it allowed you to override what you consider a personal flaw, which is this tendency to overthink auditions. If let's put a hypothetical to this. If you had the opportunity to actually sit and think for the auditions for Hadestown, if you had actually gotten the time, it was not an immediate replacement, how do you think you would have done the audition differently? And why would that have affected in comparison to the audition you actually give?
Well, so it's funny. So yes, it wasn't an immediate replacement, but the audition still took place it probably took place over the course of 2 weeks. By the time I had my initial audition, then a callback, then another callback, and then getting the role, it took place over a period of time, which is similar to maybe how it would have happened when they did the original company. Now, what's different about auditioning for an original company is you're looking for people. You're not looking for a specific type necessarily, right? You're looking for people that might go well together, especially in a show like Hadestown, where it's such an ensemble piece. You're really looking for that. I happen to know which role I was going in for. So that's I think the only difference is it was helpful for me to know exactly what I was going into, because the actors who initially went in for Hadestown, the show wasn't even fully formed yet. Yes, they had done workshops and out-of-town tryouts, but they were still making the show and creating a lot of it. Whereas I had an idea of, okay, I know what some of this music is. I know what vocal part I would need to sing. So I was able to sort of mentally prepare myself in that way, which was actually both more helpful and more challenging, because that is when I tend to overthink things. Is I'm like, oh, I'm trying to replace someone. My initial instinct, and what I've sort of learned over these years of being in show business auditioning, my initial instinct was always, okay, I need to try and do what that person did. I need to try and fit into that mold. And then after I sit with the material a little bit, after I've gone in for it, maybe after I've passed the initial audition, then I'm like, no, they're not. Yes, I might be replacing someone, but I'm my own person. There's nobody out there like me, and there's nobody out there like the person I replaced. So it's hard. I'm never going to exactly fit into that mold. And so how can I fit into the world of this show, fit into something like the person who I'm replacing, but also bring myself into it. Because I think ultimately that's what's going to get me cast, is there's something about me and that is different from the person who is to the right of me auditioning. Doesn't mean they're any less talented or more talented. We're just, by nature of being a human being, we're going to be different, and our skill sets are going to be a little different, and our energies are going to be different.
Can we explore this further?
Please.
Because I feel this is very challenging. I think you've underplayed it because you're an understudy for Hades, and that's played by Patrick Page, who is iconic for this role. I mean, he plays it so well. And when you are going to play Hades on stage, it must be very difficult to not try and do what he does so well. And even to just make the decision to personally make a different choice or portray the character in a certain different way, there will be so much pressure riding on it because Patrick Page does it in a certain way, and that's been so popular. He does it so well. And then if you make a certain choice, that could be regarded as why would you even make that choice? Is that a challenge? Is that difficult you face?
Oh yeah. I mean, Patrick he's brilliant. I mean, he's absolutely brilliant, but he's also alien in a way because nobody can do what he does. I mean, the way he manipulates his voice and the way, I mean, truly nobody can do what he does. And so that was the trap that I was starting to fall into, which I tend to do at the beginning of any creative process in this respect, where I'm like replacing someone or understudying someone. I'm like, okay, let me just try and get the blueprints of all of this, of the role, right? Like learning the lines, learning the music, learning the blocking. And so I found myself falling into the trap of trying to replicate what Patrick does, which he's also 30 years older than I am, right? Like we walk differently, our bodies are different, like we carry ourselves in a different way. And so I was starting to do that. And at some point in that process, I was like, I need to find a way to make this my own. I'm never going to be able to replicate what he does. And our associate director really helped me find my version of Hades, who is a little more playful, is not as, like, Patrick is terrifying. He is terrifying. On stage, I am terrified of him. Like his gaze, his stature, and
that voice.
The voice. I mean, it's scary. And I don't know. I think when I was able to put more of myself into Hades, right? Like my version of darkness, because we all have darkness inside of us. And so actually with the help of my therapist too, I was able to really be like, okay, well, how can I channel the darkness that is inside me, that's inside all of us, but like my particular darkness, how can I use that into my Hades? And I've kind of found that my darkness has more of a sense of humor. And so with the help of my therapist, the associate director, the other actors on stage, I was really able to find my own version of that. But it took time. Like I started learning the role of Hades months ago, and I just went on this past week, and I feel like I just started to like find my version of this character. And I know it's going to evolve because I've only done it a handful of times. And when you don't do something every day, it ebbs and flows in a way that's not, well, very much not linear, but not in a way that like it would be if you were doing the show every night. And so it's both a challenge and so freeing to be able to do your own thing with something that people have a preconceived notion of. Because if you try and replicate it, you're never going to be able to do what he does. And so it's going to just be like this like subpar version of that. And whereas I could do an above par version of what I do best.
You're giving me so many topics to explore even further. I just have more and more questions. I haven't even approached the main ones yet. You mentioned channeling your darkness and using that in a role. Nietzsche had said that a man who fights monsters should be careful that he doesn't become a monster himself, because when you gaze into the abyss gazes back. Do you think it's a challenge for actors when they take up dark roles to not get consumed by it? And I say this because one of the most popular cases, Heath Ledger with Joker, when they went to Jack Nicholson and they told him about Heath Ledger's death, Jack Nicholson's only comment was, I warned him because I told him, don't let the role consume you. So this is Do you feel it is a challenge when you take up a dark role to not get so deep into it that might actually affect your mental and physical health in reality?
Absolutely. And I think that's with any emotion too. I think it's with love. I think that happens a lot in shows, right? You're playing opposite someone and you I mean, you develop feelings for them in a way that, like, you might not in the outside world, but because you're in this role and you're feeling these emotions and they're so heightened and you're internalizing them in a very deep way, it can consume you. And I really do think it is, what is that relationship with your darkness, right? I'm reading for the third time this fabulous book called Dark Nights of the Soul by Thomas More. I've read it. This is the third time I'm reading it. I've read it 2 other times in my life that where I was in very different places in my life. But I'm getting more out of it now because I don't necessarily feel like I'm in a dark night of the soul in this moment, but I think it's very helpful to understand that relationship with darkness. And people look at darkness as a bad thing. I think, like, in general, you think darkness, bad. And I think what this book is saying, and what I've started to feel myself, is that darkness is, we all have it. We all feel it. We all go through moments. We all have these dark nights of the soul where our darkness is, like, really present. And as opposed to thinking this is a bad thing that's going to, like, make me a bad person or do bad things, how can I use this to become a better person? Like, how can I shed light on this part of my life that I've kind of closed off to reinvigorate my energy, to bring something else, to evolve and to grow. And so I understand what you're saying, but I think my relationship currently with the darkness, it doesn't scare me in that way, because I'm, as opposed to, like, it being something that I'm, like, trying to, like, avoid or, like, keep at arm's length or, like, feel that it's a bad force. It doesn't feel like a bad force. It just feels like this other energy that's a part of me that is just going to help me grow as a human.
Powerful. But I must return to my original questions. I do have so many follow-up questions.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to return to this if we have time at the end.
Please.
But let's continue on your journey. We were talking about the audition for Hadestown.
Mm-hmm.
I had another question based on that. You've mentioned in the past that when you were auditioning for Hadestown, you also spoke about it now that because you knew exactly what the character was, you were able to prepare yourself mentally. But you've also mentioned in the previous interview that you felt deep inside that this is it. I know I'm going to book this. You had a comfort, you had a certain amount of ease to it. And this really ties into the next question, which is, do you often feel that it's not the actor that chooses the role, but rather the role that chooses the actor? That there is one perfect role out there for every single actor. And what an actor can do is not try and chase roles that don't feel right, but rather just get all the right skills, get the experience, and get themselves ready for that perfect role that when it finally comes knocking on the door?
Absolutely. 100%. Again, I'm going to credit my therapist. He always says, he works primarily with artists, and he always says, all of the roles are cast already. All of the roles out there, they're cast. And so the only thing that you can do, it's just like you said, you prepare. I'm going to audition for everything that I can, and I'm going to do my best. And if I don't get that role, it's not meant to be. I really do believe that like right thing comes at the right time, because every role demands a very different skill set, and every person has a very different skill set and look and type and energy. And I've been doing this for years, and I've done a lot of great roles, and I've done 40 times more auditions than I've booked jobs at the very least. And so it really is just about, like, you have to show up, you have to do the work and audition. And if you don't get that role, it's not personal, right? Like, it's not like you're bad, you didn't do a good job. It's like, you're just not the right fit for this role. And it's a hard lesson to learn. It's hard because people are always like, how do you face that rejection all the time? And I think in the beginning of my career, it was really hard. I took everything very, 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 very personally, as like an attack on, like, my talent or, like, me as a human. And when it's not that, right? It's like, how does the energy line up in the room with the role? And so with Hadestown, when I was in the room, you as an most actors would say this too. When you walk out of that audition room, you know whether you got it or not. It's almost inexplainable, like what you feel. Like there's some kind of connection that you feel with the creative team, with yourself in that room, with the project. And I would say most of the roles that I have booked, I knew after that audition that I booked it. Now I do feel with Hadestown, when I got that audition notice, I knew.
You knew.
I did. I really did. My husband
I love it.
says the same thing. Like, I got that audition and I was like, this is my job. I'm going to book this. And I had that quiet knowing, and I don't know, I can't even tell you why, but because I knew, I felt this ease going into this audition. Because auditioning, it can be very nerve-wracking, right? Like sometimes the stakes are really high, and there are lots and lots of people there auditioning for the exact same role. And so you can feel that tension. And I never felt that tension ever. I walked into the first audition. I just kind of like breathe easy. I felt this calm wash over me. My shoulders weren't up. I felt very relaxed. And I think because I went in there with that energy, that helped me like channel the material in a way that was going to bring out the best of my abilities. But yeah, that knowing is really, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I think it's important to be able to listen to that and to be able to find some stillness and quiet that you can listen, that you can find that. Because even if I read that notice and I wouldn't have known that was going to be my role if I was like manic about things or trying to like cling and being like, I have to get this job. Yeah. I do think meditation has helped me find that quiet, right? Because I do that every morning. And it was right after I'd gotten audition notice the day before. I kind of knew. And then after I meditated the next day, it was like, I got out of the meditation. I was like, okay, this is it.
This is it. Almost like love at first sight.
Yeah.
But with the role. Yeah.
True. Which is love.
We need to start romanticizing auditions and roles as well in the same way as we do about love.
Yeah.
Right. Patrick Page has described the Walter Kerr Theatre as very intimate, almost like a wall of humanity stacked on top of each other. Do you get the feeling that theaters have a personality of their own, just from the way they're laid out, the interior, the look and feel, any other traits as well? Not just theaters, even arenas, stadiums. Do you think they have a personality or a spirit, and can that influence the show that you're putting on that day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, architecturally, that's a word, all spaces are different, right? So the Walter Kerr is one of the smaller Broadway theaters, and it's very tall. So we have 3 levels. So we have like an orchestra, a mezzanine, a balcony. And the balcony, I mean, you have to look straight up to see the balcony. So it really is this, I think, a wall of humanity. I haven't heard that either. That's really beautiful. I've played theaters in the round, right? Where there is audience all around you. That is very, very, very different from playing a proscenium. It's also, the Walter Kerr is a very old theater. It was built almost 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. You play on tour, you'll go through some of these new theaters that were built 5 years ago that have a very different energy. They don't have that like life, that like experience, the history that some of these older Broadway theaters have, which are, again, it's this presence you almost can't describe. You just like, you're in the presence of art, of like great art, of like history that you don't get when you play those spaces, those newer spaces. I think that is the benefit too of touring, doing like a national tour, is you're in a different theater every couple weeks. So you're doing the same show, but you're in a completely different space with completely different people, and the show changes. I think the way that you're as an actor, you're not going to do the show in the same way to a space where the audience is only 3 rows deep versus an audience of 4,000 people, right? You're going to do it differently. And while the show might be the same and the audience size might be relatively the same, their proximity is going to affect you. Because sometimes in these Broadway theaters, the front row is right on the stage. Other times it might be 20, 30 feet back. And I think as an actor, you approach that differently, right?
I'm going to tie this in with something you mentioned earlier where you said 2 shows are never the same. We've spoken about how performing the same show in different theaters can take on a life of its own. I'm going to add another dimension to this question. So when Adam Driver was asked about his performance in the Broadway revival of Burn This, he said, there is no right way to do this. At the end of the 4-month play, the last performance was my best one. And I want to tie this in with everything you've just mentioned. Let's assume Hadestown is happening at the Walter on 2 consecutive nights. Is it possible that both shows can take on a life of their own, even though they're happening in the same theater? It's the exact same show, it's the exact same story. Do you get that feeling while you're acting that this particular show is now taking a completely different energy, a completely different vibe? Maybe the audience has got to do something, or maybe the actor's mood on that particular day has got something to do with it. Have you ever felt that? And is it possible that if I watch Hades on 2 consecutive nights at the Walter, I might have 2 completely different experiences?
My parents have now seen the show a couple times, and they've seen it, I think, 3 times now, and they always comment on that. They're like, this was so different. They're like, I didn't notice this before, or wow, the cast really seemed in it in a way that they weren't before. They have felt that energy shift. So I know from an audience perspective that is true. As an actor, I can say without a doubt that happens every time. It's 2 things, and you mentioned both. The audience is different every single night. So that takes on, the audience is this like entity, this life that, theater, it's a 2-way street, right? Like, yes, we're doing it on stage, but it's being received by this group of people. And in turn, they're sending energy back to the stage. And so it's this like beautiful, like almost like cycle that just continues to recycle itself. And so when you get an audience you can tell when they're on the edge of their seat, when they're laser focused, when they're clapping and cheering. And then honestly, there are some audiences that are a little sleepier, that are just a little under energized. And that affects the way that we do the show, right? I think when you're a professional and, it's not that you're going to give a subpar performance, but I think the energy infused within the actors is just different based on that audience, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
I love the way you describe it. It's like this dance between the actors and the audience, and we all feel it. But now that you articulate in that way, yes, it is that this live theater, live mediums just have this quality about it. There's a beat to it, there's a rhythm to it, and the kind of feedback you're taking from the audience, and you can feel it when there's a scene where you just can't wait what's going to happen next. And exactly what you mean. Yeah, I love the way.
Because otherwise, theater wouldn't exist without audiences, right? Otherwise that's what movies are. That's what television is, right? You do the show for a live audience. Yeah. And in nature, I think that's why television and movie actors love coming back to theater, is because you get that other side that you don't get when you're doing it behind a camera. It's a completely different art form.
Yeah, I completely agree. Which is why I assume doing it on Zoom during the pandemic might have been quite challenging.
Right. No,
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Then you completely remove the live theater element. Okay. Before we move into our final questions, I would love for you to interpret what you've been building with the Lego here.
Oh boy, what have I been building?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Let's see what it looks like. We have a window into something.
Mm-hmm. What is it looking into?
A metaphor.
Yeah, it's a metaphor.
What is it looking into? Well, it looks as if it's looking into something that is being built. So we are observing something that is constantly changing and growing.
Amazing.
That is what
That's
window
one.
is into.
Yeah.
This is a window into something that already that is an established entity. And
Okay.
so we view that from the outside in.
Okay.
And this is a dog.
As you do. It all ties in. Window of the future, window of the present, and a dog. Symbolic. And I'm sure there's a deep meaning to this. Want the comments to start trying to analyze what it all means.
Somebody analyze that,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, please. I'm sure there's. Okay, final questions for you. Which are some of the greatest Broadway shows according to you? Hadestown aside.
Hadestown aside. A show that I've always loved since I was in high school, and I've seen on Broadway, and I've seen regionally, and I've seen a lot of productions of it, is Cabaret. That show to me is this beautiful blend of storytelling, history, movement, singing. I think the writing is flawless. It's funny, it's powerful, and it demands a lot of its actors. And so I've done the show a few times, but I love watching it more. It is a show to me that is unparalleled in the canon.
Done the show, but love watching it more. Yeah, great feeling. Who are some of the greatest Broadway actors according to you?
Well, I'll tell you an actor that I've loved watching since I was really young. Brian Darcy James he's an amazing leading man. He has had an incredible career. I've always wanted a career like his. I think I love watching him on stage. He's so smart. Like, you can just tell how smart he is in the way that he approaches these roles. And I've seen him in movies, I've seen him in television shows, I've seen him in plays, I've seen him in musicals. And every time I am just transfixed by this man. And I was eating lunch the other day in Worldwide Plus because he's in Into the Woods right now. And he sat down at the table next to me, and I just was like,
Starstruck.
And I'm like, one day I want to do a show with him.
Did you tell him?
No, I didn't, and I should have.
He's watching. You can tell him now.
Yes.
Yeah, just drop
Brian
him.
Darcy James.
Yeah.
I'm your biggest fan.
There we go.
I really admire him, and I hope one day to have a career like his.
What are some books, movies, or role models beyond Brian Darcy James that have strongly inspired in your life?
So I mentioned earlier Dark Nights of the Soul by Thomas More, which I highly suggest to everybody. It is whether you're going through a dark night or not, fabulous book. Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, has a book out called Big Magic that is about creativity and its divinity. And that book changed my life. I've read that book several times too. Just about this idea that creativity is this divine force and energy, and creative ideas aren't always, it's not just solely the individual. It is this beautiful blend of like experience, talent, the cosmos, destiny. It's all of it. And that's what creates art. So a person creates art, but it's only because you're a channel. An artist is a channel. And that book made me view how I am as an artist very differently, and other artists, and it definitely made me feel more grounded in my creative life.
Movies?
Sure. All That Jazz. It's a movie from the 70s. It was Bob Fosse. Bob Fosse directed it. I believe he wrote it too. But it was almost autobiographical. He wrote it while he was alive. or directed obviously while he was alive. But the movie was kind of autobiographical, and I saw that movie very young, which I probably shouldn't have because it's not quite appropriate for a young child. But I did. But my parents showed it to me because they could tell from a young age that this was what I was born to do. And so they sort of took the risk of showing me this highly inappropriate movie. And it had a huge impact on my life. I think it ties in everything I've been talking about. You see this man who is this unbelievable creative force whose artistry, his artistry really turns on him in a way, and his darkness ends up consuming him. And I think that's what happened with Bob Fosse, is his artistry kind of almost destroyed him. And I just thought that was so fascinating to see someone's creative process and like what they're doing creatively and how that like transforms into a film. And it's a beautiful film, and I watch it from time to time, and it has had a huge impact on my life.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I suggest it.
Last two questions for you. On 1st June 2022, on the night you made your principal debut on Broadway, the Instagram account Silly Billy Griffin posted the following caption, and he said, "Witnessing Alex bring a childhood dream to fruition has been a great reminder that the heart of life is indeed good. When we lead with love, we become the fullest versions of ourselves, and we inspire others to do the same. Love begets love. I want to live in a world where we all wake up to this idea. That's all to say, do the thing. Write the poem. Dance the dance. Call your best friend and make them laugh. Give that cute person your number. Sing, play, be here now. Become the change you want to see in this world." My second last question for you, Alex. What would you like your legacy to be like?
Woo! Wow. Oh, those are powerful words, aren't they? My legacy. I want to be known. I want to be known for my authenticity and my vulnerability. And I think those two things are what are going to lead me to some really amazing things in my career. But I'm not going to get those if I don't have that authenticity and I'm not vulnerable and I'm not my truest self. And I hope that I can continue to do roles and creative projects and create things that all stem from my heart and that stem from like the deepest parts of me, and to be able to show that to the world.
I think you're already on that path. As someone who's watched you on stage, it just comes through the amount of heart you put into your roles. Last question for you. What do you think is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life is love. It's what keeps the world spinning. It's what keeps humanity going. It's what keeps life flowing, is love. It's this, I would say it's an indescribable force. I think we all try and find words for it, and I don't think those words do it justice. And it's not just romantic love. It's love in the largest sense. And I think without that, we don't have life.
The meaning of life is love. Love is always the answer. Alex, if people want to connect with you, find out what you're up to next, where can they do so?
Yep. So you can go to my website, alexpuette.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at @apuette, APUETTE. Those are the best places to find out what's going on.
Sounds good. Alex, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.